Hi everyone! In today's episode, I talked to J Muzacz. Jay is a mosaic artist and muralist based in Austin, Texas. He's the co-founder of the Mosaic Workshop, which teaches mosaic classes, brings community members in to work on mosaic murals, and more. In this conversation, we talk about Jay's journey discovering the world of mosaics and what he really loves about the medium. He talks about some of the murals he's created, including the Heartbeat of Austin mural near Q2 Stadium. And he gives some of the behind the scenes of what goes into creating public art, from the initial research all the way through installation. Jay also talks about the different offerings available at the Mosaic Workshop and the value it brings to the community, and he discusses his experiences living in Japan and other places in Asia and how that impacted his creative practice. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi, Jay. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'd love to start out by asking, what was your experience like growing up?
Hi, Sophie. Thanks for having me. I grew up in Houston. I've been in Austin off and on for over 20 years now. So a lot of people ask, are you from here? But yeah, grew up in Houston, born and raised. Grew up in a very diverse neighborhood called A-Leaf in Southwest Houston. And my father passed when I was 9, and so I was largely raised by my mother and sister, although my sister was 8 years my senior, so she moved out and went to college when she was 18. So by the time I was 10, I was kind of a latchkey kid and running around the neighborhood, and my mom worked a lot as a single parent. So I definitely found a great kinship and family amongst my friends, I think from really junior high onward. And notably, most of my friends, just being in the neighborhood I grew up and the things we were into, got into breakdancing in junior high and started seeing graffiti around town and started sketching letters in my sketchbook in like 6th or 7th grade. Most of my friends were actually second generation Asian American, Filipino, Vietnamese, Chinese. Um, Again, A-Leaf was a very diverse area, still is, and that's kind of who I fell in with as a social group. So I think that kind of definitely set some trends for you know my life to come. My future is just where I'd feel comfortable, and I ended up living in Asia for 4 years, and my wife is Japanese, so I think a lot of these trends were set early on. I remember one of my first good friends in kindergarten. My neighbors were Japanese brothers. I had almost forgotten about that until I moved over there, and I thought back. I was like, "Hey, those are my first good buddies." In elementary school. So, and then growing up in Houston, if anybody that's been, it's a huge city. It's multicultural as all get out, but it's also very segregated within that. So little pockets of neighborhoods and things. But yeah, so that was that was growing up, and I guess in high school is when I really got into art. I was in art club. I was taking art classes, and that's when I found a passion and a skill for it, um, and would go on from there.
Nice. So I know now you have a big focus on mosaics, but I'd love to know what different artistic mediums have you explored at different times?
Well, it all starts with a pen on paper or a pencil on paper, sketching. Back in the day, pencil and paper in a notebook, that was the medium. And that was what I came to later realize was like a great freedom in that. I was like, you see a blank page, you got something to write with. You can create a world. You can create, abstract. You can create letters. You can create a new persona. You can create characters. And so there's a great freedom in that, just being able to draw it, right? So drawing was kind of the foundation. Really didn't get into much painting until like college, really. I've never been classically trained as an oil painter or anything. I've never even done oil painting. I just did acrylics and did a lot of marker stuff. Did some mixed media stuff. But I guess when I was like 16, I think it was the first time I came to Austin on a road trip, and I saw this guy who I later come to know as Kerry Huckabee downtown doing space paintings with spray paint. And I was just, as a 16-year-old, I might have been actually at 15 at the time, 15 or 16, and saw that. And I was like, wow, mind blown. I was like, dude, in 5 minutes is making these intergalactic posters with using nothing but spray paint, putting the flame on at the end. I was like, wow, this is very cool. Like, I want to learn how to do this. And I literally did. Went back to Houston, and I just started practicing in my friend's garage or whatever. And This was I don't even think there were videos on YouTube at the time. This is like back in the day. So just kind of figuring it out and go I would go to UT a couple years later, and he was still down there on the weekends doing that painting. So um, I had done a few, and I took him down and show him. I was like, "Hey man, what do you think?" He's like, "Man, it's trash." And then I was like, "Ah." So I kept practicing. A few months later, I'll take him another. He's like, "Oh, that's kind of decent." They eventually invited me to help him on the weekends, just like selling, like standing on the side, making sure this was Sixth Street on at 1 a.m. on a Friday night. It gets crazy, and so he's there with 50 people surrounding him and drum and bass music, and he's painting, and I'm there like managing the crowd and selling his pieces for him. He would eventually let me start to kind of paint during his breaks. Like he would need a break, whatever, and I would go and paint for him. And nobody knew the difference when you're in a face mask, your head down and doing the thing. It's just like there's music going. They're just people are drunk and happy to watch a show. So yeah, like working with him was kind of like my first time. That was my first time selling art. I think I was like 19 or 20, and did a painting in 5 or 10 minutes. Somebody bought it for 25 bucks. I was like, wow, and then that just kind of snowballed. Did that for a few months, started to, make some decent money on the weekends doing that. Yeah. So I guess, that was my experience with that medium. Mosaics is a kind of a roundabout way. I did do a one-off mosaic in Korea back in like 2008. I was big on like recycle art, and I was walking around the neighborhood where I was living. I was teaching English at the time, just doing the expat thing in Seoul. And I was walking around the neighborhood where I was living, and there was like an abandoned barber shop that had all these mirrors and a lot of them broken on the ground. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool to make something out of all that. So I got some buckets, brought all the broken mirror back to my behind my apartment. The year before, I had built a dinosaur with my friend Meredith out of like pallet wood and chicken wire and paper mache. Basically, built this like 10-foot tall brontosaurus everybody loved, put it in the front yard. So then on that theme, I was like, I'll just make another dinosaur. So I decided to make a Tyrannosaurus Rex sculpture out of the same method, like found wood, chicken wire, really ghetto rig sort of structure. Did some concrete around it and then start to mosaic it. And that was like over, I don't know, a few weeks or months, like out behind my apartment there. My neighbors thought I was crazy. I'm out there like smashing mirror every night. They're like, shut, keep it down. That was like I had no prior training in making mosaics at the time. Again, the idea just kind of transpired. It was like put two and two together. I was like, here's the material I have. Here's what we made before that it worked. I know how to make the structure, so there we go. So that was like my first mosaic, which it was kind of a one off until like more than 10 years later when I would come back to Austin and kind of refine, find it again. But I think the painting that I was doing, if you kind of look at the work I was doing in like 2015, 16, all the way up to 2018, I was doing these paintings that kind of started to resemble stained glass or mosaics, although they were just made with acrylic and spray paint and markers. But I was definitely inspired by. I started to look at stained glass windows and look at stained glass for textures and like how to segment images and things like that. How to create the structure and the hard lines, which I would later learn is like lead or copper foil. And once I got into the glass more, but so like in a roundabout way, like the aesthetic kind of took me back to mosaic, and then it was like in 2017 probably I met Heather Kruger, old school mosaic art owner and mosaic artist, and she brought some little 8 millimeter tiles that we did pixel art with for the school art I was teaching, and I just got ideas from there, and kind of the rest is history. Like I made the connections with Space Invader, doing street art, and then Photoshop and how to like map out an image to grab the pixels to then use the squares of glass to recreate the image, and that's kind of how I did my first public art mosaic mural as like the pixel style. So yeah, like again, it's just in a very organic, roundabout way. Came back around to it, and I've been doing it ever since.
Cool. That's fun to learn how you've kind of like explored different mediums and how you're seeing like the stained glass and kind of being drawn to that. Um, so I'd actually love to ask you about the project you did showing the supporter groups and fans of Austin FC. So this was the Heartbeat of Austin project. I'd love to just know more about what that project was, kind of how it came together, and yeah.
Yeah, because of my experience as an art teacher and kind of figuring out how to get people, students first, and then just the greater community involved in projects. I had done a lot of painted murals that involve like, I used to teach for the totally art, sorry to say, program in Austin. That's like after school art program at rec centers around town. We would work with, random teenagers for a couple months, and then make a mural together. And so like we're teaching young artists and non-artists how to paint. We're doing these things together. So I already kind of had this like collaborative ethos in a lot of the work that I was doing as a painter. So for mosaics, it just took a little time. The first project for Georgetown Courthouse in 2018, I did that mostly myself, printed out templates, just sat on my kitchen table laying out tiles. I did have a few friends help. And then over time, I just realized that dialing that in was a really easy way for people to be involved because it's just like doing a puzzle. It's like you can see the answer key right there, you're just matching colors. So as long as we were able to prepare that, sufficiently for people, it's like the template, the key is good, the answer key is good, all the colors are there, and there's a simple grid system we fit into. So over the last, 7 years, we've kind of been dialing that process in. So for the mural at next to Q2 Stadium, it's the one at McCullough Station, Heartbeat of Austin mural. I applied as a mosaic artist and a muralist, and I won the call not based on a proposal, just based on my experience, I guess, and how to work with community. And so that the panel or whatever selected me based on that regard. So then I had to come up with a design, and that process is one whereby now I know as a public artist to really make work that resonates with the space is to go and dive into the space, visit it, research it, talk to people, really try to get a feel for who's going to be using that space on a regular basis and make something that's going to settle in and make sense there, right? It's very different than a studio artist just making whatever they want, putting it up on a gallery wall and hoping somebody buys it. It's a whole different mindset because you're taking in consideration the users of the space and the whole environment. Like, what is the architecture like? What are the other finishes in the area? How is that going to complement it or contrast it? So there's a lot of considerations that go into like design wise, but also subjectually. Like, what is it going to be of? Is it abstract? Is it people? Is it nature? Is it whatever? So being that the stadium is right in the shadow of this station, like literally right there, and 99% of people who use that thing are going to be going to games. Like, well, it's kind of obvious to like tie it in with the soccer team. Thankfully, a couple of my studio mates at the time, Fabian and Luis, they were really big in the supporter groups. Luis had actually done the first TIFO, which is like the mural they put up at the beginning of the soccer game. So the FC supporter groups, like he already had a lot of those friends. I had met him at the studio. So I was like already kind of dialed into that community. And it was relatively easy for me through Rigo and a couple others to just bring me to the game and let me experience that vibe, because I'll be honest, I'm like not the biggest sports guy. Like I wasn't a huge fan or anything, but I realized the importance of that space for that community. And so I was like, well, then let me go be a fan. Let me go dive into this world. And so I spent months just kind of like going to games, helping paint tifos, talking to people, interviewing people, and even did a survey of like, what do y'all want to see? And that all went into the concept that ultimately transpired, which is one of highlighting the supporter groups and alongside the transit workers, which is sort of the Cap Metro train station, like sort of their brief and like their goal for the project was to like highlight some of that as well. So I kind of put those two together, and we got lots of photos from some of the photographers who work with the supporter groups, and they compiled like their favorites. And I told them what I was looking for, different emotions, different angles, different types of people, young and old. And from there, I just kind of developed a design composition that I felt like made sense. It had a lot of energy, had a lot of different emotions present, showed a lot of diversity amongst people. And then there's a story behind each person as well, like how long they've been with the supporter group or what do they play and what they do outside of that and just in their life in Austin in general. And so there's all these like tangential narratives, as well as the fact that we're able to highlight photographers' work in the piece, because like we wouldn't have that image without the photographer, and we try to credit everybody. So it gives a lot more people a voice and a platform than just like me in my studio in a studio bubble or something, creating a concept and be like, here, what do y'all think? It's really generative. It's really like built on those conversations and that feedback and everything. Um, and I mean, I was super stoked on it. It's probably one of my favorite projects to date because of just the response. We had over 200 people from Cap Metro staff to supported groups to just friends from the neighborhood coming out and helping place tiles at the studio. Did that over a few months. And then we installed it with, I had probably 8 or 10 people, some good friends and studio assistants helping to install it. So we all got our hands dirty getting it up on the wall. There were a lot of challenges along the way, construction delays, measurements fitting right, cutting tiles with a diamond grinder and making things fit. And yeah, it's just highly collaborative. I don't know. I think to get behind the veil a little bit of public art, I think for artists that are just trying to get into it or new to it, is like it takes a long time. It takes a lot of conversations. It's highly collaborative, and you really have to be flexible and responsive to like the site, to your construction general contractors, to the team, the architects. Everybody's got insight and experience that you have to listen to, because that's not what I do. I set tile, but I don't know concrete, and I can design aesthetically, but I don't know how to put up, handicap railing or, handlebars, or, even do the landscaping. So it's like, it takes all these different parts for the piece to settle into the site and come together. And that's what it takes. Ultimately that project took about a year and a half from like the time we applied to the time we actually installed. So it's a long timeline, and a lot of work goes into it along the way. But um, yeah, I'm super happy with how it turned out.
That's awesome, and yeah, I think would be, like, very informative for people, to learn kind of about all the research that goes into it, kind of before you're even coming up with the idea or, like, as you're coming up with the idea, because I think people might not realize how much it like you mentioned, actually, like, going to the location and then, like, going to a game and understanding kinda, like, the culture and the atmosphere around that, um, and how it's kind of all coming together with, like, different people working together, and you're kind of finding out more and getting clearer on, like, what you want the end project to look like.
Yeah, my one of my favorite parts of it is super subtle, and you might not notice it, but it's like amongst all the portraiture, there's all these little white spots, right? That they were like digital little paint brushes. If you do Photoshop, there's like little paint spots. But after going to a game in the supporter group and getting drenched in like water and beer and everything that people throw when they score a goal, right? Like that's that energy. That's the splash, right? And you wouldn't know that unless you've been in the supporter group, because that doesn't happen in the normal stands where people are sitting down eating nachos. Like it's you got to be in that actual environment. So to capture the actual energy and passion that was going into the people beating on the drums for 90 minutes straight and chanting and throwing water, just getting into it, like that was the way for me to visually like depict that. So it's kind of splashing throughout the piece. But there's like subtle things like that. Like I wouldn't have come up with that visually, aesthetically, without having that experience. And it's largely thanks to Rigo and La Murga and the Los Verdes and all the groups that came out and helped out and were super kind to like invite me to things. And um, yeah, so like building friendships, along the way.
That's cool, yeah, that's cool you're able to kind of have those, like, details that kinda captured, like, the energy and that you, like, wouldn't be able to even know about if you hadn't had that experience. Okay, so, you've kinda touched on this as you were talking about that project, but I'd love to know, what does it take to make a mosaic piece from start to finish? So you kinda mentioned a little bit about photography and Photoshop, but kind of what are, like, the different steps that you have to follow?
Man, there's a lot of different types of mosaics, so that's a tough question. I mean, I could speak to kind of my personal methods. I kind of have two sort of distinct methods. One being the pixel art, we call it digital impressionism, and that's where yeah, basically the heartbeat is a great example of that, where we're collaging imagery together or digital design, and then taking it into Photoshop, doing the math on like the size tile we're using and how big the wall is and what colors we have available, and breaking that down basically to the pixel. And we can count to the exact tile. I mean, we had over 120,000 tiles in that single mural, and a lot of times if pieces are very square, we can count like to the exact. The Georgetown courthouse thing had like 54,620 or something. I don't know, something like, but like to the T, you can get the exact number. Um, So that's like, and then once you have the design, then it's just like the tedium of being in the studio and placing in the grids. And that's where like the first project I told you took me 3 months to do like 300 square foot mural. And like just last month, we were up north of Fort Worth at a library. We did a 200 square foot mural in like 3 days. So it has gotten way faster because we're able to invite people in to help out, right? Like 150 people came to the library over a weekend and we got the whole thing laid out in record time. And then we just go and install it the next week, you know? So it's kind of, it's multi faceted about like how important it is to the process, but it also gives people in the community a chance to like have a hand in their built environment, to be like, oh my, parents and kids would come, and then their kids will be able to see that piece and generations later and be like, I laid that square right there, I laid those tiles there. So it allows for a lot of participation while still rendering a really professional final product. And for me, I've been doing murals for 20 years. I've seen a lot of really cute, kitschy, like elementary school murals with like handprints. I love it. Like everybody's getting their hand in the process, literally. But it looks like kids did it. And for me to take that to another level, like not only can kids have a hand in it, it can look professional. It can look like a professional artist made this because that's my role in this whole thing. It's the technician and I pull the pieces together. So, and that's what people will invest in terms of infrastructure. We want a piece to last for generations, 50 plus years. We don't want a handprint mural. We want something that is resembles and is indicative of the community. The community had investment in, the community had a hand in making. Like it gives a lot more, I don't know, like power to the piece, in my opinion. So that's the one side of it. And then the other side of the mosaic practice, like the free form, recycled tiles, because again, it's ever since right coming out of college and getting into environmental art and activism is like using materials that are waste, using things that are trash. One person's trash is another person's treasure. We can use oops paint and paint murals. We can use scrap tile, broken tile, and make mosaics. It's kind of that same. That's just been my mo. My whole career, and so going to tile shops and being like, do y'all have any scrap tiles you're throwing away this week? Oh yeah, they're filling a whole dumpster full every week. So we can go to that tile shop and be like, here, fill this bin up with various scraps. We'll come pick it up, and then we'll use that in a mural that's going to beautify the community. Not only is that giving us free material, it's redirecting waste from the landfill because a lot of these tiles and glass can be recycled. A lot of the ceramic and things can't be recycled very well. So they just go to the landfill. That creates also this challenge of like, what is our palette? What material do we have this week? Because I can't go to the store and buy red tile if I need red. Maybe we got a bunch of blue tile donated in. Maybe we got a bunch of white marble and boring subway tile. Like, how do we use that? How do we make it interesting? So it creates this new creativity within constraints, right? Like creates this new challenge of like, how do we adapt the material at hand to make something aesthetically pleasing for the community that is a new landmark or monument that they would be proud of or proud to have a hand in. And yeah, so like that's kind of the fun thing that keeps it interesting for me. Was like, any given week I don't know what materials we're going to have on hand. And that's what we're trying to put to use into some of these projects. And that's where the mirror one, like the first mosaic I did back in Korea, I was like, I had a bunch of mirrors, so that's what we used, and it looked really cool. Like I've realized early on that there's no bling, there's no shine like mirror shine. And years later, I moved back to Austin. I would meet like Stephanie DiStefano and learn about Isaiah Zagar and these artists who were using a lot of mirror and mixed in with tile to add a real shine to their mosaic murals. And I realized, oh, it's kind of like an outsider folk art technique to use this type of stuff. So, the pixel art mural, obviously we have to buy that glass, but a lot of that glass is made from recycled content, those square tiles. It's like pool tile basically. And then the more free materials or things that we're busting up, and we're also hand making some custom ceramics. I have this board right here by Hope Hummingbird. That's one of her pieces. That she's an amazing porcelain and ceramic artist, and we can hand paint and glaze tiles and stamp words into things and textures, and it adds this whole other narrative layer to the mosaic on a macro level. So when you see these details and textures throughout the piece, like the piece might just be big abstract or a word or something, from far, but then when you get up close, you see all these other little nuggets, these little Easter eggs. Um, so yeah, those are the kind of the two, and you can see how like, and if you look at them visually too, and hopefully I'm explaining it well, but like there's two completely different ends of the mosaic spectrum, and um, it keeps it interesting for me. As an artist, I feel like we have a great tendency to get bored and to have to do new things, and to be creative, we need sort of these creative challenges. And so for me, that creative challenge is like, how do I use the material that we have in the studio at the time, and make it look cool, and then for the pixel ones, like how do we adapt to the site accordingly and make something that's going to be, resonate with the community and something they can be proud to share for generations.
That's really cool to learn about, kind of like the fact that you're either being able to reuse materials and put them to a better use, and also involving the community in a way that's they're helping make it, but it's still looking like very polished and very like professional. And I think it's also cool because it's kind of enabling, oh, you said it's enabling them to have a hand like in their built environment. And it's like when they're actually helping with the mosaics, they're like getting involved with the community, and it's something that like doesn't involve like being on their screens. Um
Yes, that's a big one. I've noticed that, as we do, classes here at the studio as well, and ever since 2019, every Saturday almost, we've been doing free or cheap, mosaic classes because I saw that potential. I saw people, getting back into the analog, tactile, real world. A lot of people are on their screens 8, 10 hours a day for work, and then they're on their phone or they're watching Netflix at home. So you're on a screen all freaking day. So to get back in reality and tinkering and making and using your hands, it focuses in a way that allows your brain to rest. Right? Actually, is like mosaic is. Sometimes people are stressed for the first 5 minutes as they're figuring it out, but then after that, you see this Zen state come into people, and it's like very meditative. It's very therapeutic. There's literally been proven now, like your brain on art, it like gets to an alpha wave level or something similar to like Zen Buddhist monks meditating. So like making art with your hands for 20 minutes is absolutely beneficial to your brain and your mental health. And it's also social in a way that's like not forced, because you could be an introverted extrovert. You could be in a room working on your mosaic next to other people working on their mosaics, tinkering. Occasionally there's a conversation happening. Maybe it's quiet, maybe there's music, but you can just kind of tap in and tap out with a natural ebb and flow. And there's no force like, look at me in the eyes, and like across from the table we have to have a conversation for an hour, and there's no like, oh, I need beers to be social, and there's no, I have to spend a bunch of money at a restaurant to go out. I'm trying to make this third space where people are being creative and crafty, expressing themselves, making friends, hanging out with their friends and family intergenerationally. We see a lot of like, mother daughter or kids and grandparents coming in, and they can both do this thing together. There's very few places like that in our society that even exist. And so when we started doing it back in 2019, we got a little grant to do free workshops. I just started seeing the potential of it. So I just kind of kept it going myself out of my little studio on Cesar Chavez, until last year. Finally, we were able to get our own brick and mortar spot. Now we're over here on the east side permanently and open 7 days a week. And people are coming in and making mosaics. And it's super rewarding to see people have that same experience. And then a lot of times those people find community, they find camaraderie, and they'll come back for a mural that we're working on, or they'll, become a part of this mosaic movement, as it were. So we're in a super fun spot. And insofar as we can become like a hub for the medium in the region, there's literally nothing around. We get people driving from Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, everywhere just to come to the workshop, because there's no other place like it. And there's very few fabricator studios making mosaics on a large scale like we are anywhere in the country. I think there's one in Chicago, there's one in California, there might be one in the Northeast, but then the nearest ones are going to be in Canada and Mexico. And so even around the world, if you look up mosaic, like professional mosaic studios, there's very few. And kind of like stained glass, it's one of those things that it was commonplace, back in ancient Greece and Rome, when everybody had a mosaic rug in their home. But now it's kind of a lost art. It's kind of, tossed by the wayside for whatever reason. It's a luxury for the wealthy, but everybody in between didn't really have access to it. So we're trying to connect those dots, make sure that people do have access to it, make sure that it's fun and affordable and relevant and cool and contemporary. And it's a whole nother tangent, but I think a lot of the interest for me is bringing like the graffiti street art into mosaics because that collision has rarely happened aside from like Space Invader and a couple one-off pieces. Like, so I'm trying to do more of that because that's where my roots come from, the graffiti and street art. Um, so there's some fun projects on the horizon in that regard, and we've kind of dabbled in it. But um, I mean, the skate decks behind me or the spray cans. The spray can mosaics was a way for me to use this medium and pay homage to that world and that part of my artist career. And it's pretty well received. So see a lot of potential in the future to do more stuff like that.
That's really cool. Yeah, I love how you talk about, how people are able to come in and kind of have that focus when they're working on mosaics, and I think that that's what's great about, getting involved in something like that is that it kind of is like there's less distractions or, like, less information coming at you than when you're, like, online, on the screens, and there's just, like, too much information, and it's so important for us to be, like, finding the in-person community and, like, having those interactions, and being able to do something with other people doesn't necessarily mean, like have to mean, like, you know, talking face to face for however much time, but just having, like, that shared thing, like, kids are able to maybe do it with their grandparents or their parents and kind of you're both doing it together. I feel like there actually are, like, so many options when you look for them of, like, just things you can do that don't involve, like, being on your phone, and I feel like it's so much better for your mental health. Um,
For me, early on, I kind of realized there's two ways to live in the world: creator or consumer. And a lot of people are consumers, 24/7, right? Um, you're consuming food, you're consuming content, you consume, consume, consume. To be a creator, you step out of that. And crafters know what I'm talking about. Anybody who's a crafter, you get in the zone, you love, whether it be quilting or cross stitch or mosaics or painting or drawing, making anything, carpenters, when you're in that creative flow, you're in a state, that's different than all that. And it's rewarding. And I think too often I hear people that say, come into the workshop even still today, like, "Oh, I'm not talented. Oh, I can't even draw a stick figure. Oh, I'm not an artist." I don't care if you're an artist or not. You don't need to be an artist to make a mosaic. You just need to be a human being. Just like come in and have some fun, throw some color around, like, tinker a bit, like we all used to play with Legos when we were kids, right? Like it's no different than that. So like why do we grow out of that ability to like play and have fun and make things? And architects, designers, artists, we're the lucky ones who get to keep creating for our whole lives as like a job, but a lot of people don't, and so we hold space for that. We want to make space for that because I feel like it's important and valuable in a healthy society, because not only are people creating for fun, it's an expressive outlet, and it's one where again that like the therapeutic benefit can tap in.
so we've been kind of talking a little bit about the Mosaic Workshop, which is actually for people watching on video, which is where you are right now.
Yep. Look at show the video.
Oh,
You can kind of
perfect.
see in there we got some folks on a community eyes project today, and the Austin Mosaic Guild has some folks coming in, and it's a guild of over 100 members in Central Texas. Anybody's interested?
So I'd love for you to say or talk about what is the Mosaic Workshop? When did you start it? What kinds of like offerings do you have?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Touched on it. 2019 was the official start. 2018, I had actually done a couple. I did my first public art mosaic, and I did like a community mural at the Mexican American Cultural Center, which is La Mujeres down on the Town Lake Trail. Now you can go see it whenever they finish construction. Um, so that was like it was kind of like informally started the workshop and how everything would coalesce. But in 2019, we applied for a little grant from the city of Austin. It used to be called a community initiative grant. It was like $3,000, and we used that. Carmen Rangel, who's a good friend of mine, a muralist, local artist. We were hanging out, and she'd helped me on the first mosaic, and we're like really fell in love with the mediums. Had all this glass lying around. Let's just do free mosaic workshops. So we did free mosaic workshops every week, and people would come in. The first day, we had kind of like an intro, and everybody can make a small piece or whatever. And we had the conversation of like, hey, there's a wall right outside our studio that maybe we could do a mural on. What do y'all think? Like, yeah. And so through a conversation the next week, this one guy, Chuck, he brings a photo of the Gray Ghost, Roosevelt Williams, who's a blues piano player here in East Austin from Bastrop. Played piano for like 70 years, and he passed back in '96. but he had this great iconic photo of this East Austin music legend that we all kind of rallied around. And this was, a dozen or so people who were coming to the workshop second week in a row. We're like, yeah, let's do the mural. And because I had developed the process to do pixel art, we could do a portrait on a large scale and be really accurate. So we map out the portrait, and the next week we start laying it out. Took about 8 weeks. We're in the studio laying out the square tiles for the face, and then about 4 weeks outside, we're doing recycled mirrors, ceramics, and stained glass, and like stone even for like the piano and the jacket, eh, um, and the hat in the background. So all that was like hands-on experience for people, not only like what goes into like designing and creating a mural, but the craft of mosaic. And so, alongside people making smaller projects, yeah, like it was super rewarding. And that was how it was kind of born. And it was such a hit. I was like, how do I keep doing this? So at first I just started doing it like $25. I was like, come in on the weekend and you get a board and some glass and I'll give you the basics. Carmen designed a worksheet that we still use to this day. It's solid. It's just like a little 2-pager, like, this is how to make a mosaic. These are what to consider. And that's, again, my experience as a teacher for 10 years goes into that, like how to make a lesson, as it were, so that people feel like they're learning something and really getting the hang of it. Because that's what it is like people need confidence. People come in and they're like scared. They don't know. As soon as they have a little confidence and understanding, they're able to take it to the next level and express and, really have a rewarding experience. And so, yeah, just developed over the years. I started to have my good friend Katie, aka Hope Hummingbird, who did this skate deck here. She started to teach with me on the weekends. In 2021, Zoe joined the team as a studio designer and started to develop the brand and the website more. And it's just been an ongoing, chipping away at it. Always bootstrapped by projects and commissions. It's been kind of a passion project. Like we've never had investors. Other than our crowdfunding last year to get in this space, we raised about $10,000 from the community. Thanks for that support, everyone that helped out. But in exchange for like workshops or T-shirts or whatever it might have been, or artworks, people donated so that we can move into this space. But it's really been, yeah, like just like bootstrap the whole way. We've grown our team, from just me and then me and Carmen to now having people on full-time staff and studio assistants and a couple instructors that can teach on the weekend and throughout the week. And I mean it's steadily growing. So um the potential of that is huge. I mean, I feel like we're almost at a point where we're considering like a second location or something. Like we could take the model of the intro classes and the team building stuff that we do and the school collaborations. We've got curriculum around that. We could take that, package it, and could do it in another city. We could do it across Austin, for example. And then here, this warehouse is kind of best suited for like production, and we're able to produce, thousands of square feet of mosaic murals, indirect method on like, tape method or on mesh or on panels. We could produce it here in the comfort of the studio with our team, and then we can take that out and install it. And we can install anywhere. I mean, we've been doing stuff around Texas this year, like Fort Worth, Dallas area. But we can also, ship. We did a project last year in DC. So where, I drove up some and shipped some and installed it there. So the potential to kind of have this again, like as this really strong hub for the medium, just a creative, powerhouse for mosaics, and then just kind of branch out from there, because I just want to see more people have fun with the material and the medium. I mean, there's no shine like the mosaic shine and the materials, and it never fades and lasts forever. This is different than paint. It feels a little more permanent.
Okay, so I know we're kind of jumping around here a little bit, but you spoke or you kind of mentioned in the beginning that you lived in Japan for 3 years.
I live in Japan for 3, Korea for 1, live in Australia, New Zealand for 2. Backpacked around, like, yeah, I'm a traveler. I'm a wanderlust. I love traveling. It's great inspiration and challenging, but exciting, and
So I'd love to know like how that affects the work that you do, the art that you make, if it has an effect.
yeah. I mean, I first I first left the country when I was 21. I had some leftover student loans in my bank account, and I went to backpack Europe for 6 months when I was like 21. So I graduated a year early, and I tell people I learned more in 6 months backpacking Europe than I did in 3 years of college. Paying paying a lot more money for that piece of paper. But no, I got a lot from UT. Don't get me wrong. I got a sociology degree, which has in a roundabout way been very useful in the work that I do. But travel, it's proven that like travel creates new experiences. New experiences create synapses in the brain. This creates more pathways. So it literally opens your mind. Like travel literally opens your mind. And so people who have never left the country, get the fuck out. Like get your passport and go. Like go see another country. Go be in a place where you don't speak the native language. Like go see how people around the world live. It will open your eyes to if anybody listening, go. So and it's been one of the most rewarding things in my life is seeing places like the Colosseum in Rome, the pyramids in Giza in Egypt, temples and shrines, postcard worthy temples and shrines and waterfalls in the mountains of Japan. You know, um, like I wouldn't trade any of that for the world. And the one thing I'll try to do is like live without regret, and like that's one of them. Like on my deathbed, I'll be like, "That's at least I got to see the pyramids." It's like you gotta go and experience the world for what it offers. But living in Japan was probably the most like formative experience. One, I was there for the longest. Two, that's where I met my wife. And I just think that the people and the atmosphere, it resonated with me in a way that like no other place did. I felt like the way that people work together in harmony as a group, they put the group above themselves. It's a very selfless place in that regard. America's can tend to be a very individualistic country, and Japan is more like the group harmony. Above all, it's just a beautiful place. It's clean, it's safe. Um, there's a reverence for nature. There's shrines in throughout the mountains, and um, kind of rooted in the Shinto tradition of like tribalist. And I don't even call it religion. It's just like a way of life. It's like a way to respect and revere natural elements. And so there's temples and shrines built all over the place. And a lot of people have been to Japan and probably go to Tokyo and Kyoto. And, Kyoto is the city of 1,000 temples and it's truly like one on every corner. And it's what gives to that real chill, Zen vibe and just architecture and food like nowhere else. Um, so I think it definitely made an impression, and that's where I did my first book as well. I was there living in a small fishing village, teaching English by day and just doing drawings by night, which then turned into my book, first book, Japan 365, that I self-published back in like 2011, 2012. And I used it in part as a fundraiser for raising funds for the great tsunami and earthquake that hit the Tohoku area in 2011. Because it was the same year I was doing the project, and then I was able to have the book published in 2012. And then the next year, quit the job English teaching. My wife and I did a bike trip the length of Japan, and ended up in Okinawa. And because my visa had run out, I just had to do itinerant farm work, and I was like cutting sugarcane in the field for 3 months, and picking mangoes in the mango hothouses for 3 months, and doing all this like random odd jobs and farm work. Painted some murals, did some art. Eventually got on an artist visa properly so I could like actually get paid, sit under the table. But yeah, that was a big adventure. And I think like having the time and space and figuring out how to self-publish and crowdfund. Self-publishing and crowdfunding are two things that would come around much later, 10 years later, when we did the ATX Urban Art Book. And it's because I had that experience in Japan, doing those two published projects, that I was able to do this really ambitious book back in 2022. So again, everything like in its time, right? Like there's experiences we have and there's things we learn how to do that might just be a one-off, but it might manifest later. It might build on itself. And every skill you have, every network you create, like those are things that you can sort of put to work to realize these bigger, more ambitious dreams. And I think that's what Japan really gave me, was the space and time to think, to create, and it humbled me in a way, that you just got to play your part and do it quietly and do it well. Like, some of the best craftspeople in the world, you'll never know about them because they don't have an Instagram, because they're not spending time on social media, because they're building their craft, because they're dedicating every day, all day, to that love and passion for making that thing, or to, mastering carpentry, or mastering cutting sushi, or whatever it might be. Like, it's without the ego of it, and it's just trying to be the best at what you do, but not for the fame or fortune, just because, and that's what really clicked with me, and that's what I try to keep in mind here. Although, to have any success in America, you do have to have a public presence, and you do need to let people know what you're doing, because people won't find you otherwise. But I try to just like keep my head down, do the work, stay focused on that, do the best I can, and yeah, let the work speak, let the actions speak louder than the words.
Nice. As a final question, I'd love to ask, what has been the most unique material or item you've ever incorporated into a mosaic?
We've done some a couple mosaics made out of wine corks. Um, Randomly got hit up from a company that was like, "Oh, we can send you, boxes and boxes of corks." It was like a wine on tap, whatever, so they don't do the bottles. So it's this eco angle. Anyway, using the wine, like the different stains of the wine cork to create the image. I did another one for an espresso, the coffee who does the coffee pods, and I was like, "Oh man, it's like super not good environmental friendly." But I realized that they had made strides in recent years. Like, they'd have aluminum recyclable pods, and the coffee grounds are composted, so there's ideally very little waste in their process. And so we integrated actual, like, smashed aluminum coffee pods into this mosaic alongside a lot of custom tiles. And I did try putting coffee grounds into the grout, and that was kind of a fail because then it just looked like bugs. But just experiment. There's things that work and things that don't. One of the most interesting things was, this was at the Domain in North Austin, but they were doing renovations on the new shop, and they were excavating, and they found a cave under the floor, literally where the Nespresso shop is now in the Domain. And the guys excavated out all these beautiful, like, crystals and quartz and stones and things, and they gave us some. It's like, I don't know if you use these in the mural or whatever. So we broke some up, and we used actually some of these stones from the cave under the store in the piece. I thought that was kind of cool. Um, I don't know. Nature's Treasures was a fun collab too. Like the Rock and Gem store in North Austin. Like, we did a thing with them for their new location, and uh, our studio artist Stanton was there with using like all these different types of amethyst and obsidian and all these different rare stones and things to create these mandala like features. So it's kind of a never ending, you can kind of use just about anything, that'll last. I've got some things on deck. Like, I want to use a Cadillac symbol. They pull off a car. I've got some bike gears that I want to use on something. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's anything goes. Like, in the world of mosaics, kind of just mixed media, but usually ceramic and glass. Yeah.
Awesome. Alrighty, so where can people go to find out more about your work?
Come to the studio, come to the workshop, take a class. We got a website, it's themosaicworkshop.org. You can see all the classes or, murals we might be working on. My website is jmuzacz.com, JMUZACZ. Kind of on Instagram because you have to be, but definitely website is probably more thorough. But yeah, just coming to the workshop. We're off of Airport and 7th in East Austin, 729 Airport Boulevard. So the best way is just come and, experience it for yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shay.
Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate the time.